Hey, Honors Algebra 2 and Algebra 2 students. This is Mrs. Fellon, and what I'm going to do is I wanted to kind of go over some additional problems that were in 4.3, just in case you needed kind of a how-to on some of these. So I am on page 90 of your student journal, and we're at kind of the end of the document. Okay, so we're starting at like number 13. So I'm going to do a couple of these just so you can kind of see how they're done, and then I'm going to go ahead and like leave a couple for you to do. All right, so it says use synthetic division to evaluate the function for the indicated value of x. So I want to show you that there's two ways to do this problem. And the first way is probably the way that we would most likely do this, would be like if x equals 2, you're just going to plug in 2 into this equation and solve. And that's an extremely great way of solving this problem. However, another way to do this is by using synthetic division. And so rather than plugging 2 into your equation and, cubing it and multiplying it by -3 and so forth, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend like I'm just going to divide by this factor. So x equals 2, that goes on the outside. So -3, 4, -17, and -6 are my factors that go on the top, or are my coefficients that go on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and do the synthetic division. So I'm going to drop down that first value. I'm going to get -6 when I multiply. I add, get -2, get -4. And let's see here. I get -21. And then I get -42 as my final answer here. So then when I add these together, I get -48. When you're using synthetic division to evaluate, your remainder is your output. So what I want you to think of this as is kind of like if you're plugging in x, this is your input, and this is your output. So when x equals 2, so here's my x value of 2, my output is -48. So this is just an alternate way to kind of evaluate a function for a given point. So again, you could do this for any value that would happen to fall on this graph. And so this is just your input and your remainder is actually your output. So I just wanted to go over one of these, and 14, 15, and 16 are kind of done the same way. Let me show you number 17. It says, what is the value of k such that -x to the 4th plus 5x squared plus kx minus 8 equals, is divided by -4, has a remainder of 0. So there's a couple of ways to do this as well. And so I wanted to show you two ways to do this. You could do synthetic substitution or synthetic division. And there's not a whole lot of room down here, but I'm going to go ahead and set up my synthetic division. So -1 for my x to the 4th. Remember to put a 0 in for the x cubed, 5 in for the x squared, a k in for the x, and a -8. So what you're basically doing is you're trying to figure out this value. So I'm going to drop that down, and I get -4, and then I'm going to multiply, and I get -11, and then I get -44. So remember, you want your remainder, it has to be 0. So you know that in this scenario, so requires a little bit more kind of like thinking backwards, so to speak. So in this scenario, you know that this number here has to be 8, right? In order for this to work, this has to be 8, so that -8 and 8 give me 0. Which means, what number do I multiply 4 by to get to 8? Well, that's 2. Okay, so let's keep working backwards. Well, if I added the numbers together and got 2, what number did k have to equal? Well, it would have to equal 46. Because 46 minus 44 would give me 2. So that's one way of doing this problem. Another way of doing this problem is to kind of use what we were talking about before, like plugging in your value. So I know that basically what we're saying here is when I plug in this input, so x equals 4, I get a remainder or an output of 0. So I'm giving you your x and your y. So I'm going to go ahead and do like if I write my equation, I'm going to go ahead and plug in 4 for my input. And I know it has to equal 0 because that's my y value. And then ultimately what I'm doing here is I'm just solving for k. So I get negative 256 plus 80 plus 4k and then minus 8 equals 0. And so I get negative 184 plus 4k equals 0. And then if I add 184 to both sides and then divide by 4, I get k to equal 46. So there's two ways to kind of do this problem. I wanted to make sure at least I kind of went over those. So that's all I needed for this video, kind of quick and short, but now you can kind of practice those particular problems. All right, thanks guys.